The splintered door of the derelict boathouse sagged on its last hinge, a perfect mirror for the man who stood before it. To anyone else, Elias Thorne and his German shepherd, Major, were just a broken man and a stray dog staring at a pile of rot on the edge of the sea. A forgotten relic not even worth the land it was sinking into. But the dog knew better. Major, with an intuition that defied explanation, had led him here, obsessively, pulling him away from the ghosts in his apartment and toward this specific ruin. He knew that hidden beneath the decay, sealed away behind a century of salt and secrets, was not just the key to Elias's healing, but a $200 million truth that had already cost one life and would undoubtedly try to claim his as well. If you're new here, we'd be honored if you'd subscribe to our channel and become part of our community. We love hearing from you, so please let us know in the comments where you're listening from today. The silence in Elias's life wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the phantom echo of a car door slamming shut and a laugh he could no longer quite place. It had been 2 years since Anya was taken from him. 2 years of living in a purgatory of dust motes dancing in the slivers of light he allowed into his cramped apartment. He was a ghost haunting his own life, a former Special Forces operator whose skills were rusting away alongside his soul. Then came Major. He hadn't been looking for a dog. The dog, a gaunt German shepherd with eyes that held an unnerving intelligence, had found him behind a diner, shivering in the rain. Elias had offered a piece of his burger, and in return, the dog had offered him a reason to open the front door for something other than forgetting himself in a bottle. He'd named him Major, a nod to a rank he'd once respected, a life he'd once lived. Major was more than a companion. He was a sentry. One night, as Elias's hand reached for the amber liquid that promised a few hours of numbness, Major had stood, placed a heavy paw on his arm, and stared at him not with judgment, but with a plea so profound it pierced the fog. The dog then nudged the bottle with his nose until it tipped and shattered on the floor. The spell was broken. The next day, on their drive to nowhere, Major began to whine, a low, insistent sound as they passed the collapsed boathouse. He'd pawed at the window, his entire body tense. Elias tried to drive on, but the dog's distress was so acute, so focused, that it felt like a command. He turned the car around. This derelict structure, this monument to decay, was to be his new mission. He didn't know why, but he trusted the dog more than he trusted himself. Using the last of his savings, Elias bought the property for a pittance. The locals thought he was a fool. The structure was a skeleton, its ribs picked clean by winter storms and neglect. But for Elias, the physical labor was a balm. Tearing out rotten planks was like tearing out festering memories. Nailing new boards into place felt like setting a bone. The work was honest and brutal, and at the end of each day his exhaustion was clean earned. Major was his silent foreman, always nearby, watching. Then the dog's strange intuition surfaced again. He became fixated on a corner of the workshop, under a collapsed workbench draped in stiff, dusty canvas. For 2 days, Major scratched at the same spot, refusing food, his focus absolute. Finally, Elias relented. He cleared the debris, his crowbar groaning as he pried at the ancient floorboards. Beneath them, nestled in the damp earth, was a small box wrapped in oilskin. It was heavy, solid. As he lifted it, he felt a tremor of significance, the feeling a soldier gets just before the world changes. Inside, the air smelled of machine oil and time. There was a thick, leather-bound journal, a strangely shaped brass key, and a small, intricate cipher wheel. The journal's pages were filled with elegant script, but large sections were written in a complex numerical code. Elias's pulse quickened. This was a language he understood. The rust on his skills began to flake away. Night after night, with Major sleeping at his feet, Elias worked. The discipline of his former life returned, a welcome ghost at his shoulder. He sat at a makeshift desk, the lantern light carving him out of the darkness, and painstakingly began to break the code. The journal belonged to a man named Alistair Finch, the original Boatrite. But Alistair had lived a double life. During the Cold War, he was a mechanic for a clandestine government agency, a craftsman who built hidden compartments into boats, smuggling agents and information across hostile waters. The boathouse wasn't just a workshop. It was a safe house, a final stop for those who lived in the shadows. Alistair wrote of his pride, his patriotism, and his deep regret for a mission that went wrong, a friend lost. In the final, coded entries, he spoke of his last duty, securing a legacy, a cache of assets intended to fund a trust for the families of fallen operatives, hidden where no one would ever think to look. He wrote that the boathouse itself was the final lock, and his work was the key. Elias felt a profound connection to this unseen man, a fellow soldier from a different war bound by a similar code of honor. The restoration was no longer just therapy. It was a duty. He had to honor Alistair's legacy. He had to find what the old man had died to protect. The work on the boathouse took on a new reverence. Elias wasn't just rebuilding a structure. He was resurrecting a sanctuary. He learned the language of the wood, the way the old cedar and oak responded to his hands. He planed and sanded the support beams, their surfaces slowly revealing the warm, honeyed grain beneath decades of grime. The gaping holes in the roof were patched, and for the first time in years, sunlight streamed in, illuminating the workshop with a cathedral's grace. As his physical world transformed, so did his internal one. The heavy silence in his mind began to lighten, replaced by the rhythmic sounds of his saw and the steady breathing of the dog beside him. To finish the restoration, he needed specialized hardware, things he couldn't salvage. This forced him into the nearby town, a place he'd actively avoided. In the town's old hardware store, a kind-faced woman named Sarah helped him find century-old brass fittings. She remembered Alistair Finch. A quiet man, she'd said, kept to himself. But his work, it was art. Said his boats were built to last forever. Her simple words of respect for the long-dead boatright solidified Elias's resolve. This small, hesitant step back into the world felt fragile, a vulnerability he hadn't felt in years, but it didn't break him. He was building more than just walls. He was rebuilding a connection to the world, one nail, one conversation at a time. The boathouse was beginning to breathe again, and so was he. One crisp afternoon, a luxury sedan, gleaming and entirely out of place, crunched down the gravel path. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his polished shoes a stark contrast to the dusty ground. He introduced himself as Marcus Vance, a developer. His smile was wide but didn't reach his eyes. "I heard someone bought this old wreck," Vance said, his gaze sweeping over the restored framework with a dismissive air. "I represent a consortium that's been trying to acquire this whole stretch of coastline. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. Triple what you paid." All cash. Elias felt an immediate, visceral dislike for the man. It was the way he called Alistair's life's work a wreck. Major, standing beside Elias, seemed to agree. A low, guttural growl rumbled in the dog's chest, the fur on his neck bristling. "It's not for sale," Elias said, his voice flat. Vance's smile tightened. "Everything is for sale, Mr. Thorne. It's just a matter of finding the right price." "I'll be in touch." He slid back into his car and drove away, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and a palpable sense of menace. Elias looked down at Major, who was still staring down the path where the car had disappeared. The dog knew. The fight for this place had just begun. The threat, when it came, was not subtle. Elias arrived at the boathouse one morning to find the new windows shattered, shards of glass glittering like cruel diamonds on the floor he'd so carefully restored. A set of Alistair's antique chisels, which Elias had painstakingly sharpened, were bent and broken on the anvil. The violation felt deeply personal, an attack not just on the building, but on the piece he was trying to build. There was no note, but none was needed. Later that day, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. That was just a reminder of how fragile things are. Marcus Vance's smooth voice said, devoid of any pretense of charm. "Wood burns. Foundations crack. People get hurt. The next time I won't be targeting the building. I suggest you reconsider my offer." The line went dead. The cold fury that settled in Elias's gut was an old, familiar feeling. It was the chilling clarity he'd only ever felt in combat, the moment when the mission becomes absolute. Vance had made a critical mistake. He thought he was threatening a broken man fixing a broken building. He had no idea he was threatening a soldier who had just been given a reason to fight again. Elias looked around the damaged workshop, not with despair, but with grim determination. This was his ground, and he would defend it. Shaken but resolute, Elias turned his focus back to the journal. Vance's aggression meant the legacy was real, and Vance knew about it. He re-examined Alistair's notes, the cipher wheel, and the strange brass key. It wasn't a key for a door. The notches were too complex. He ran his fingers along the massive central support beam he had just finished sanding, the one Alistair had called the heartwood of the workshop. His fingers found a small, almost invisible seam in the wood near the base. The key fit perfectly. With a soft click, a section of the beam swung open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was not gold or bonds, but a second ledger, this one much more modern. As Elias opened it, the pages revealed not a patriotic history, but a criminal one. It was a detailed record of a smuggling operation run by Marcus Vance, using the coastline for illicit shipments, money laundering, and intimidation. Then, Elias saw the date, October 14th. 2 years ago. His breath caught in his chest. It was an entry detailing a logistics issue on the coastal highway. A police convoy, unexpectedly rerouted, was going to intercept a high-value shipment. The ledger described the solution with chilling indifference. Secondary vehicle utilized for roadblocks/distraction. Elias's world tilted on its axis. He knew that highway. He knew that date. It was the day Anya died. Her accident hadn't been an accident at all. She was the secondary vehicle. She had been murdered. A piece of collateral damage in Marcus Vance's criminal empire. The weight of his grief, the guilt he had carried for 2 years, morphed into a white-hot, singular purpose. This was no longer about honoring a dead patriot's legacy. This was about getting justice for his wife. The choice was stark. Hand the ledger to the local authorities, who the book hinted were on Vance's payroll, or deal with Vance himself. For Elias, it wasn't a choice at all. He had spent a career operating where official channels failed. He would not fail Anya now. The restoration of the boathouse took on a new, tactical dimension. Every nail he hammered, every rope he coiled, was done with a soldier's intent. He wasn't just a builder anymore. He was a sapper, preparing his battlefield. He used his knowledge of demolitions and fieldcraft to rig a series of non-lethal traps throughout the workshop. A tripwire connected to a weighted cargo net in the rafters. A pulley system designed to drop a heavy sailcloth, disorienting and entangling intruders. He reinforced the main door and created fallback positions within the workshop, using the very layout he had so lovingly restored as a defensive asset. He worked with a quiet, focused intensity, Major a constant shadow at his side, seeming to understand the shift in purpose. The boathouse, once a symbol of his healing, was now being forged into a weapon of justice. He was turning his sanctuary into a fortress, and he would be ready when the enemy came to his door. They came after midnight, a new moon cloaking the coastline in near-total darkness. A heavy van, its headlights off, rolled to a stop. Vance emerged with 2 large, thuggish men, their intent clear. They moved toward the boathouse, armed with crowbars and a quiet arrogance. Elias watched them from a darkened window, his heart a slow, steady drum. He was not the broken man they expected to find. The first thug kicked open the door and charged in, only to have his feet swept out from under him by a low-strung wire, sending him crashing into a stack of empty barrels. The second man, more cautious, entered and was immediately enveloped by the heavy sailcloth that dropped silently from the ceiling, tangling him in its folds. Elias moved from the shadows, dispatching each of them quickly and quietly, using pressure points and zip ties. It was over in seconds. Then only Vance was left. He stood in the center of the workshop, his expensive suit now seeming ridiculous, his eyes wide with shock as he took in the scene. Elias stepped into the light. "Looking for this?" he asked, holding up the ledger. Vance's face twisted from shock to snarling rage. He pulled a handgun from his jacket. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he hissed. But just as his finger tightened on the trigger, a black and tan blur exploded from the deepest shadows of the workshop. Major, silent until this exact moment, launched himself through the air, hitting Vance's arm with the force of a linebacker. The gun clattered across the floor. The man screamed as the dog's weight bore him to the ground, Major's teeth inches from his throat. A deep, rumbling growl, the only sound in the suddenly still workshop. The dog held him there, a loyal guardian delivering the final, decisive blow. With Vance and his men secured, Elias made a single call, not to the local police, but to a trusted friend from his unit, now a senior agent in the FBI. Within an hour, the quiet coastline was filled with the discreet hum of federal vehicles. The ledger was handed over, and Vance's entire criminal enterprise began to unravel. The investigation eventually uncovered Alistair Finch's original cache, not in the boathouse, but in the ballast of an old boat he had sunk in the cove, a final, brilliant piece of misdirection. The bearer bonds and rare artifacts were worth even more than Alistair's journal had estimated. Elias, now the executor of Alistair's will, saw none of it as his own. He used the entire fortune to establish two foundations. The first was the trust Alistair had always intended, for the families of fallen operatives. The second, he named Anya's Light, a charity dedicated to supporting victims of violent crime and their families. His final act was to finish the boathouse, not as a private home, but as a community workshop, teaching traditional boat-building skills to troubled kids. He had restored a building and, in doing so, restored himself. Standing on the new pier, the setting sun casting a golden glow on the water, he threw a piece of driftwood for Major. The dog, his hero, bounded after it, his joy infectious. For the first time in a long time, Elias Thorne smiled, a true, unburdened smile. He had found his peace, not by running from his past, but by building a future on its foundations. In the end, this story is a testament to the quiet power of unwavering loyalty and the profound truth that sometimes, the deepest wounds can only be healed by taking on a mission greater than oneself. Elias believed he was rescuing a dog, but in reality, Major was rescuing him, guiding him not just to a hidden fortune, but to the justice and purpose he needed to live again. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, we would be so grateful if you would like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every interaction helps us bring more stories like this to light. And as always, we would be honored to read your own stories of loyalty and healing in the comments below. We'll see you in the next video.